Hello everyone, my name is Sergei Toshin and I'm the founder and CEO of a mobile security company called Cybersecurity. I have prepared a short presentation for you, let's check it out. Today I'm going to tell you about mobile app vulnerabilities, typical attack vectors on mobile devices and mobile apps, and I will also tell about the current situation in the mobile security world. But before I proceed to the main content, let me introduce myself and Cybersecurity company. My journey began as a white hat bug bounty hacker. I was looking for vulnerabilities in mobile apps and reported them to the affected companies. After the fix, they rewarded me with monetary rewards. At the same time, I was developing a tool that helped me and simplified my work. It checked application sources, highlighted vulnerable code lines, and triggered vulnerabilities onto different categories. My life changed in 2019 when Google launched its own bug bounty program called Google Play Security Rewards Program. Google wanted to secure the most popular applications that have at least 100 million of installations on Google Play. And during a short period of time, approximately 4 or 5 months, I reported hundreds of vulnerabilities, and Google rewarded me with almost $1 million in rewards. It made me strongly confident that I can effectively identify vulnerabilities and I can help developers to detect and fix vulnerabilities in their sources. Even if super popular mobile apps with almost unlimited budgets for everything are vulnerable to different kind of attacks, it means that everyone else is vulnerable too, and I could help them. And that's why I started company that's called Cybersecurity, and right now we provide solutions to our customers so they can integrate Cybersecurity into their development pipelines and monitor all code changes by Cybersecurity, so there are no new vulnerabilities are added by their developers. As I told before, my journey began as a bug bounty hacker, and I reported vulnerabilities to different companies, and sometimes they didn't believe that mobile applications could be vulnerable because they thought that a mobile application is just a proxy for their IPs, and they wanted to protect server side, but they didn't want to protect mobile applications. They thought that mobile application is just for getting data from their IPs and displaying it for user. And because of that, sometimes companies decided not to fix mobile vulnerabilities, even if they were like sensitive and leaded to user data leakage. So today the situation is better, but still bad, because even if you ask your own developers to tell what kind of vulnerabilities, mobile vulnerabilities they know, they will probably start talking about client-server communication issues such as weak and vulnerable SSL chippers, miss of SSL pinning, and other configuration issues related to SSL. Sometimes they will also tell about obfuscation. Another modern threat today is AI agents. Those AI agents help developers to write code, or sometimes they write the code instead of developers, but those AI agents are trained on sources written by real developers, and that source was vulnerable. And that's why AI agents also produce vulnerable code. You will probably ask why you say that this code is even more vulnerable. I will say that sometimes developers feel that they dealing with untrusted data, and that's why they adding different checks, validations, filters, and so on. But as we tested in oversecured, AI agents usually don't add anything, and that's why the result code becomes more vulnerable than the developer's code. If you ask me to compare Android and iOS, I can say that for Android the situation is a bit better because there are a lot of resources, there are a lot of articles and disclosed vulnerabilities regarding real vulnerabilities and regarding Android security. For example, oversecured blogs provide like huge set of researchers for developers, so they can inspect real vulnerabilities found in popular applications, and they can learn typical mistakes the developers make, and they can avoid them in their own applications. For instance, when we asked Google for feedback, they told that oversecured blogs is the best place to learn about Android security. So let's come back to iOS. I think that for iOS the situation is really bad because the most of the developers, they don't know anything about iOS security, and they will also refer to client server communication issues, and sometimes they also say about using secure keychain attributes. On the other hand, in the second world of iOS security, there are hacking teams and hacking companies that sell that buy and sell exploits for Android and iOS, and they resell those vulnerabilities to third parties that attack real users. And there is nothing in the middle. For example, nobody knows anything about securing like normal apps like banking apps, messaging apps, and e-commerce apps, for example. Like there's a huge attack surface, and they don't know anything about this, and they don't check for security vulnerabilities, but it's a huge space to secure. And this is an example of what I told previously. This is a screenshot of a tweet of a hacking company that buys exploits, and they offer huge price for vulnerabilities found in iOS and Android devices. They also buy vulnerabilities in popular applications such as messengers. For example, like 2 years ago, some users were attacked via WhatsApp messages, and WhatsApp messages were the entry point to get access to user device. For example, a user received a message from another attacker. After that, an attacker got a code execution vulnerability in WhatsApp application, and after that they could extend the attack to get root access using other vulnerabilities, because they could chain vulnerabilities and extend their presence on the device and extend their privilege on the device. So let's talk about mobile attack surface. In oversecured, we divide all attack vectors on 5 different categories. First is remote attacks, and usually they come from chat messages, or when application parses SMS or MMS messages, and due to incorrect or invalid checks of received data from chat messages or SMS messages, there's a number of potential vulnerabilities leading to incorrect parsing. The second is vulnerable deep links. Deep links is a feature available on Android and iOS devices, and it helps to link, for instance, websites, emails, and mobile applications, so the user can get directly to mobile app from their website. And due to incorrect parsing of deep link data, an attacker could also hack into the mobile application. The second is same network attacks. Usually those attack happens when the attacker is located in physical closeness to the victim. For instance, in Bluetooth radio signal or NFC radio signal. When an attacker is located in the same Wi-Fi network and the application launches local web servers to cache content among the same network or to communicate with smart devices, or when it makes a request to local IP addresses, an attacker could respond to those requests and also send dangerous data that could hack the application or the device. The third is local attacks. Usually they happen from third-party applications installed on the same device. And there is a big difference between Android and iOS operating systems, because on Android it's like a #1 attack because of huge IP interfaces provided by Android operating system. But for iOS it's opposite, it's very limited and very strict, and normally applications cannot communicate with each other, and that's why local attack surface for iOS applications is much lower. Number 4 is physical attacks. Those attacks happen when the attacker has the user device in their hands and they try to break the pin and get access to user device functions, or the application hidden functions or sensitive functions and other sensitive data of the user. And number 2 example is dumping on logs from the user device and inspecting them, because sometimes the application logs sensitive data such as credentials, access tokens, and other data such as location history, network history, and personal data of the user. And the last thing is hard-coded sensitive data in application sources. Usually an application works in combination with third-party content providers, such as services for storing user files, user images, or service providers such as Amazon Web Services. And due to incorrect application architecture, developers hard-code access tokens to those services, and an attacker can get access not only to specific user data but to data of all users. Number 2 example is credentials to staging services, and the attacker can get access to staging services and inspect unreleased content and unreleased application features. Number 3 example is certificates for signing. When the attacker gets this certificate, they can sign their own application, malicious application, with this certificate and pretend to be a legitimate application. And the last example is VPN certificates, and when an attacker gets access to the VPN certificates, they can log in to internal network, and the attack will be extended to like full company infrastructure, but not only to mobile application. So let's talk about statistics. So for Android, as I told previously, because of local attacks, there is 92% percent chance that it will contain at least one high severity vulnerability. And number one of statistics is hard-coded secrets. The application contains API tokens to third-party services, credentials to staging environments, test accounts, different encryption keys, signing keys such as HMAC, so an attacker can sign their own data and pretend it to be legitimate data. Number two is access token leakage. Usually this vulnerability happens when the application receives a deep link to open a URL in embedded web view, or to make a network request to attacker-controlled URL, and the application attaches user token to authenticate the request, and sends user token to third-party URLs, and that's how an attacker can take over user account. And number three is theft of arbitrary files. Usually this attack happens when an attacker forces the application, the vulnerable application, to copy internal file from internal directory to external public directory, such as SD card or documents directory on iOS. And that's how an attacker can get access to these internal file contents and potentially get access to private user data, to access tokens, and so on. And second example is when an attacker can force the application to send file contents, internal file contents, to an attacker-controlled web service, and they also will get contents to an internal file. Typical attack vector on Android is when the application asks users to pick a file. User picks the file, but due to Android application architecture and Android operating system architecture, they're not sharing files directly. They sharing links or URIs to the content, and when an attacker forces the application to handle an internal resource, the application will process internal resources in incorrect way, and it will cause vulnerability and user data leakage. Talking about iOS, there is a 32% chance that it will contain at least one high severity vulnerability, and number 1 and 2 categories are the same. iOS applications also contain a lot of hard-coded secrets, and they also process deep links in incorrect way, and they leak user access tokens and user sessions. But number 3 category is surprising, because due to iOS architecture, by default, iOS applications can cache all the network requests by default, and that's why when user authenticates and caching is enabled, the application will cache login and password and other credentials. And if an attacker manages to get access to the file containing all cache file and all cached requests, they can get user credentials, and it's very dangerous. It's much more dangerous than getting current session, because knowing login and password, they can attack the user on other services, not only in your specific application. So let's talk about real vulnerabilities found by oversecured. Actually, there are a lot of them, and this slide names just a few. You can get all technical details in oversecured blogs. We have descriptions, remediations, and suggestions, and so on. like how developers fixed our vulnerabilities, what is the time frame, and all other technical and not technical details. So in 2023, in this year, we checked security of all Android vendors, because you know that Android is an open source operating system, but in reality there is no a device that running Android open source project sources. Normally, all vendors such as Google, Samsung, Xiaomi, and all others, they take Android open source project and they modify its sources. And they add their own features, and it's called Android fragmentation. Android is very different in different vendors. And Android is also very fragmented in terms of vulnerabilities. And this year we inspected security of different vendors, and everyone, absolutely everyone, received 20 reports from us. And right now we're waiting until they fix the vulnerabilities, and we will publish an article or a set of articles about that. But in 2022 we reported multiple vulnerabilities to Samsung, and they were system level vulnerabilities, and we're happy that we helped them to identify them and fix. Because of our research, Samsung placed us as number one, their reporters, in 2022 year. We also find vulnerabilities in PayPal and PayPal for Business applications. They were vulnerable to memory corruption vulnerability, and we also managed to exfiltrate user data using these vulnerabilities, such as email, private information, and also access tokens. Another example is Amazon application. We found an arbitrary code execution vulnerability in it. Another example is Google. We discovered an arbitrary code execution vulnerability in it, and we also found vulnerabilities in TikTok. It was vulnerable to also code execution vulnerabilities and theft of arbitrary files, leading to user token disclosure and account takeover. And the most impactful vulnerability found by Oversecured is a vulnerability in Google Play Core library. It was vulnerable to persistent code execution vulnerability, and all users of this library were vulnerable to. This library is used to reduce the size of application, and the user would download like only main functionality, and then the library would decide which part of application it needs to download. For instance, resources for different screen sizes, or native libraries for different processor architectures. And you would probably ask, are there any real vulnerabilities that are exploited by evil actors? And the answer is, of course, yes. And Oversecured was involved in such research. The story is in February 2022, we found a number of vulnerabilities in Android open source project, and we responsibly disclosed them to Google. And we started waiting when they fixed, so we can publish the article. Google managed to fix a few vulnerabilities, and then we got requests from CNN journalists asking us to check Pinduoduo application. Pinduoduo is an e-commerce application. It's super popular in China, and it could be called like Chinese Amazon. They asked us to do this research because they suspected that it exploited vulnerabilities that we previously reported to Google, and that were fixed by Google. And when we opened sources of this application, we found out that it exploited uh, more than 50 Android vulnerabilities related to different Android vendors, and it used those exploits, and it attacked users to advertise itself, to show a lot of annoying ads, and increase its sales. So let's come to the conclusion. Mobile security world is huge, and the number of mobile features is growing with every update. And since the number of features is growing, also the attack surface is also growing, and the number of vulnerabilities is growing too. And that's why we want to encourage all the developers to pay attention to their codes when they code in, to learn Android security and iOS security basics. And we want to also note that it's much harder to fix a mobile vulnerability, because when developers fix a vulnerability on the web, they can update it immediately. But based on our own statistics, only 50% of users will update their applications within a month after the release and a fix of vulnerability. You probably have your own statistics, but it should be similar. Thank you. Any questions?